guys, this is Frances O'Roark Dowell, author most recently of Hazard, which is a novel in verse. What's a novel in verse? It's a story that's told in poems, right? It works a lot like a novel in that you've got a main character, you've got a big problem that the character has to resolve by the end of the story. You have obstacles that get in their way, and usually, culminates in a big crisis, and then things resolve for better or for worse, right? That's how stories work. That's how novels work. Novel in verse is a story, though, that in some ways it's more like a story that's told in snapshots than in chapters, right? So typically all the novels in verse that I've read move chronologically, but they don't necessarily move in scenes, move in chapters, move in a way that a novel moves. So think of that if you're looking at a picture that tells a story, and then you turn the page, and there's another picture that tells another part of the story. That, to me, is how novels in verse function, by and large. Exceptions to every rule, but that's how I think of them.
Hi, hola, my name is Margarita Engle. I'm going to read a poem from Singing with Elephants, my new verse novel. Today, La Poeta taught me about onomatopoeia, which she said is just a way of saying growl by writing grr, and howl by substituting ow. She said it's fine if I only want to make vowels rhyme instead of whole words, and las rimas can come in the middles of lines instead of at the ends. Poetry, she said, can be whatever you want it to be. Thank you. Gracias.
Okay, so now I'm going to try to do something hard, which is hold up my phone, hold up my book, and I'm going to read a poem from Hazard, and I wonder if I can do this. So this is what it looks like on the page. Hazard is kind of funky because it's a novel in verse that's actually told in emails and text messages and documents, but I paid attention to every single line. And this is, Hazard is in therapy for anger management. He's a football player. He got kicked off the team or suspended from the team for making a bad hit. In other news, his dad recently came back from Afghanistan having lost a leg in an IED blast, and that's something obviously that Hazard is dealing with over the course of this book. In order to get back on the field, he's got to go through this therapy, and he's doing this workshop. Not a workshop, I'm sorry, a workbook, and having to answer questions. And one of the questions is, do you have siblings? Describe your relationships with them. What would you say to them if you were being honest about your feelings? And Hazard's response is, describe my relationship with my brother? Dude, he's 11. You think we have a relationship? What world are you living in? I can tell you some things about him, sure, like the kid picks his nose when he thinks no one's looking, and he's a little criminal, always has been. Last week, I found comic books in his backpack, each one still wrapped in the plastic it was packaged in. 5 copies of the same Spider-Man. No receipt. There never is. I told him I didn't get it, and Ty just laughed. What's to get? Said it felt good, like an itch that got scratched each time he stole something and then gave it away to some kid who thought he had everything. Turns out, Ty said, he didn't. I think the first novel in verse that I ever read was Make Lemonade by Virginia Ure Wolf. I feel like this came out around 1999, 2000, and it might have been the first in a trilogy. It's really a wonderful book, and I was blown away by it. And I've always read a lot of poetry, but I do think, other than say like the Odyssey, which I only pretended to read in high school, that this was the first novel in verse as we think of them now in contemporary children's literature. My most recent favorite novels in verse include A Long Way Down, which is YA, but by Jason Reynolds, who I think is a wonderful poet. And he began his writing career, I'm pretty sure, as a poet. I began my writing career as a poet. Another book that came out pretty recently is called The Lost Language by Claudia Mills, and it's wonderful. And she is someone like Jason who really attends to the language, and that's something that a novel in verse can do. You know, when you're reading a typical novel, sometimes you're struck by really good, you know, a well-tempered sentence, right? Or something, just a piece of writing that really strikes you and it's poetic. And but a novel in verse can really take time with images and rhythm and the use of line breaks to create emotion or speed or what have you. And I think that Claudia Mills also does this really well. And that her book, again, is the Lost Language, and it came out last year, and it's a quiet book, and I'm not sure that it got the attention that it deserves, so I recommend you look at it now. One of the things I loved doing with Hazard was he texts a lot with his best friend Jackson, who also plays football, and he's a really good friend. He really is. And so writing these text messages was a lot of fun because it gave me an excuse to first of all, be a 14-year-old boy, which I've never been before, and it was kind of fun. But also, I have sons, and when they were younger, I would read their texts a lot, but also then they text me. So I feel like it was a way of channeling some creative energy I'd gotten from my sons, but also sort of imitating them in these texts. And one of the things that was really interesting too was trying to build this relationship between these two friends via text, right? Because that's the only time you see Jackson, know Jackson, read about Jackson, is when he's texting with Hazard. And so a fun writing exercise is to do your own series of texts, and you can do them as poems or you can just do them as text, but to create a relationship between two friends. And it takes more than one text to do this, but you can actually, if you've got a phone and you text yourself, you can go through, like go look at your text history, like with one of your best friends. And if you just read a few texts back and forth, it's like there's nothing much reflected about your friendship. But if you go through the last 5 days or the last, however many, the last 2 months, you start understanding, you start seeing the relationship that's at play here. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take two friends, and I want you to give each of them phones. These are imaginary friends. These are made-up friends, which are kind of fun friends to have, and have them in conversation with each other via a series of texts. But there's got to be a problem, right? Because that's storytelling. There's always got to be a problem. So one of your characters has a problem. The other is trying to help him or her solve that problem. So decide who your characters are, how old they are, what they're doing. Maybe they're two best friends and one has just gotten caught stealing cookies from the school cafeteria and is texting her best friend like, I'm in so much trouble, but I can explain, and start that conversation between them. And remember that you're trying through these texts to illustrate this friendship, to give the reader a sense of who these friends are, in terms of their personality, in terms of their interests, in terms of whatever, but also what their relationship is like. And it may be that one sends these huge, long blocks of text, right? Do you have that friend who's just like, you're like, dude, it's a text. Well, you could also write me a letter. And one is very terse, or they may have very different styles of writing and spelling. That was very fun for me to drop all punctuation and spelling rules. So there's some really fun things you can do with these text conversations. But remember, what you're trying to do is create a portrait of a friendship via text, and and try to do 3 or 4 pages of text between friends and see what emerges. But remember, there's got to be a problem, and and we want to see who each of these characters is through how they text, what they text about, their style of texting, etc. Give it a try. It's a really fun, low pain, low anxiety writing exercise, and given that in all likelihood you text all the time, you've had a lot of practice at it already. Okay, give it a try. Let me know how it comes out.